The 3764 Elvis Presley Boulevard. Hit it, Elvis. You got me.
All right, everybody, welcome to Elvis Back on Tour. And as part of an ongoing feature here at Elvis Back on Tour, we have tracked down another very lucky person who had the honor of seeing Elvis in concert. And we're very excited to introduce to you Jeff Bonilla from Los Angeles, California, who saw Elvis in Oakland, California on November 11th, 1972. So we're very excited to get a chance to talk to him. So welcome, Jeff, and thanks for joining us here tonight. And it's really a privilege
great to be here.
To get to speak to you.
Oh, no, the privilege is mine. I love what you guys do. It's so cool. I'm glad you guys reached out. And so, I mean, this is always, you know how people are. Elvis is always very special to them in their own special way. And definitely same goes for me in my life,
Right. Well, tell us a little bit, Jeff, about, where you were born and raised, and give us just a little bit of background and kind of, what got you into Elvis, and then just tell us a little bit about,
Sure.
How you came about the tickets and who took you. And then let's jump right into Oakland, November 72.
Absolutely. Well, I grew up in San Francisco, and my earliest memories of Elvis were actually watching Elvis movies with my grandma. It seemed like every time she was watching a movie on TV, there was this cool guy that was doing karate moves on bad guys and stuff, but then he would sing to a girl. So I'd leave the room and say, call me when he's beating up people again, right? She would say that, and I remembered I found this record in my dad's stack of records, and it said Elvis Presley, and I said, that's the karate guy. So, I put that on a little stereo and I just started listening to the song, and I remember it was a whole lot of shaking going on. And I just kept listening to it over and over and over again. And my dad came home and he saw that I liked Elvis. So he went out and got me Elvis's golden records. And that was it. So, like 5 or 6 years old, you're just like, listen to Jailhouse Rock and Heartbreak Hotel. And,
right.
All of a sudden, I discovered music through Elvis, and while all my classmates were listening to the Partridge Family, I was listening to Elvis, and so I remember my grandfather as a surprise to see this Elvis movie out of the movie theater, which was Elvis on Tour at the time. And,
wow.
It was like the coolest thing that I'd never seen it before. I'd just seen his movies. So to see that movie, Elvis on Tour, was just amazing. And then when I found out, I don't remember how I found out, but that he was going to be, in the area. We lived in San Francisco. He was going to be in Oakland, California, which is across the bay. And I remember I must have pestered my dad a lot because he ended up getting tickets for all of us, because that was expensive back then and pretty big hike to drive all the way across the bay to, Oakland. The first thing I remember about walking into the Oakland Coliseum is the fact that they gave you a little booklet. I'm not sure what you would call it. Anyways, it was a bunch of really cool pictures of Elvis, like pretty big pictures of Elvis. And a few years ago, I found it in a box, and I ended up taking like 3 of the photos, and I ended up like framing them and putting them up on my Elvis wall. It's the one memory, the one actual tangible memory that I have from that night is those 3 photos that came from that booklet that, as far as I'm concerned, I'm the only one who has them framed like that, but
Right.
so I remember that to me means a lot, that I have that from that night, that booklet, that concert. So, and I just remember the hardest part was just waiting and for the show to start. And I think I bugged my dad. I had to go to the bathroom. A few times, because I was excited. When I went to see him in Oakland, we were way up in the rafters, pretty far away.
Okay.
from him. So he was, pretty small.
Right.
And back then, if I remember right, I don't believe they had the screens like they do nowadays or anything. So, you shared binoculars, And yeah, I mean, his, just the power of his voice, the music, I mean, especially that theme, when he's coming out, it's pretty amazing. And I just remember all the, it was like insane, just light bulbs flashing everywhere, to that music as he came out, and he, went across the stage and everything. And, he went right into CC Rider. And I think at the time I remember he did this thing like this Amen riff, which I'd never heard before, which was, I think he put that into the show at that time. What was even better though was I got to see him in Lake Tahoe, and I don't remember the year, maybe a year later, or maybe, I'm not sure, you guys might have the date.
73 is when you said you saw him.
Yeah.
May of 73.
Yeah, I did remember he had done a Mother's Day concert the day we saw him, a special concert for Mother's Day. So it was in May. Yeah. So the Lake Tahoe show for me was much more exciting because we were actually sitting probably 20, 30 feet from the stage, because in Tahoe they had these the dinners, these long tables where everybody just kind of sat, and it was a dinner show. And so I mean just seeing him just so close was just amazing, and he was in a good spirits that night. He sounded, phenomenal. I remember the song that blew me away, because I'd never heard it before, was You Gave Me a Mountain. And his voice was just so powerful on that one. It was I just remember that for some reason that song really sticks out in my head. And he was kind of joking with people. He was telling some stories, which sometimes are hard to figure out exactly what the story was, but he was entertaining and joking around. And at one point during the part where he gives out scarves during Love Me Tender, this at the end of the song, this guy stands up in the audience and he goes, "Elvis, I love you too. Can I have a scarf?" And so Elvis takes a scarf and he tosses it, and some girl snatches it out of the air. And he's like, "Oh no, man, come on, give him the scarf," So
Right.
She just tosses it behind her head like a bouquet, and and he got the scarf. And at some point, my mom tugged on me, and she said, "Look behind us." And we were at the end of the dinner table, and behind us were the booths. And in the booth behind us was Lisa Marie, and my guess is Linda Thompson, probably Linda, because she was with a woman. And I just remember looking back, and my mom recognized her because my sister was the same age as Lisa. So for some reason, she just knew that was Lisa Marie behind us. And there was another gentleman there that my mom recognized the second day we were there. And that story is funny because we were in an elevator and we realized that it was a bunch of the Elvis guys that were coming in the elevator with us. It was Joe Gershon, I think, the conductor. Yeah. Right. So it was him and some of the probably the Stamps, one of those groups, the singers that were with him.
Right.
Go down the elevator, we get to the lobby, we go out, and there's another group of like Elvis entourage, and they go meet them. And once again, the little girl who was Lisa Marie was there, and she's with the same gentleman from the night before. So my mom goes up to them, and she just goes up to this man, and she says, "Are you Colonel Parker?" And he looks at her and goes, "No, ma'am, I'm Colonel Vester." And she goes, "Oh, because I saw you last night in the booth behind us, and you were with Lisa. Hi, Lisa." She's going like that, "Hi, Lisa," and so I just thought you were Colonel Parker. And he's like, "No, ma'am, not Colonel Parker." And so, anyways, they start leaving the lobby, and as they're doing that, I'm kind of like embarrassed. My mom's like, bugging them, and so I walk away. I go to a table and I pick up this Elvis book. I think it was Jerry Hopkins was the guy who wrote one of those first Elvis biographies. And I'm flipping through it. I go to the pictures and I look up and I realize that's Elvis's dad. It's Vernon. And afterwards I buy the book. Right. I take it to my mom. I go, "This is who you were talking to." And she's just like, "Oh, like, why didn't you show me that earlier?" So I think that I don't know. I think it's kind of cute, kind of funny that you know, he didn't just say, no, sorry, I'm not Colonel Parker. Instead, he said, no, I'm
Right.
Colonel Vester. Like, you know,
Right.
that just always struck me as very funny. Like, you know, he could have said anything, but he said, I'm Colonel Vester. And we all know, you know, Vester was his brother. So,
Right.
so that's sort of my Elvis story, you know, aside from the amazing concerts, you know, that we got to see. Um,
Yeah. That's a good story within a story. So that's the kind of stuff that we're looking for. So thanks for sharing that. If you don't mind, Jeff, what I'd really like to do, since we are the Coliseum fanatics, if you will, let's go back to Oakland, if you don't mind,
sure.
because really like to capture some more of your thoughts on Oakland and that night, and just kind of, if you will, what we did with Gary and with Ed is we kind of got him in the building, you know, wind the clock back 50 years. So you're 9 years old. And I just want to get your perspective one more time as a 9-year-old, because it's a different perspective, you know, than an adult, or, you know, even a 15 or
Yeah.
16-year-old. 9 years old, you're, you know, obviously excited to be there. And you got the lights come down to 2001. So just run us through that one more time, because I think that's the most exciting part of an Elvis concert. Even if you're listening to it on a CD, that's the most exciting part, is that opening riff. Just take us back there one more time.
Yeah. Well, once we got there, it seemed to us, or to me as a little 9-year-old, seemed like an eternity before he finally came on stage, because you had to go through some, you know, wait around, and then you had to watch the show that went on before him. I think it was a comedian. But yeah, when those lights finally went down, you know, that was, and you just, I had just seen Elvis on tour a few months earlier, so I knew that the minute I heard that theme that he was going to come on, you know.
Right.
So yeah, excuse me. Yeah, so basically, I mean, I was so excited. You know, the lights went down, and you hear the theme, then you hear the drums, and you hear that, you know, when they start doing the vamp, and he comes on stage, and he walks across the stage a few times back and forth, you know, just acknowledging all sides of the auditorium. Then he went and he got into
Right.
that, you know, that stance that he got into. And I remember I was just, even though he was really far away, I was just trying to see, I could see him shaking his mic, you know, occasionally he'd be singing and he would shake his mic.
Yeah.
And I just remember
Yeah.
seeing that and just saying, yeah, that's what he did on the, you know, on in that movie. So I was like watching everything I could, just walk his stance, the way his legs, one leg behind him that was moving, you know, and it was just, you know, when I had the binoculars, it was great. It was, and just that the I guess just the atmosphere of being in this huge Coliseum. I mean, Oakland Coliseum is huge, and for me, you know, just being a little kid, it was like just amazing. It was the first time I'd ever been to a concert, and it was just um, kind of just, it was just huge. It was like larger than life, you know, just like he was. And even though we were far away up in the rafters, it was still a larger than life performance for me. You know, I remember the songs. I remember he did Amen. I remember, you know, when he sang the songs that as a little kid I loved, you know, like Jailhouse Rock and, you know, Heartbreak Hotel and all that. And I just remembered,
Right.
you know, and he got to Love Me Tender, and you know, there were some girls that were allowed to kind of get near the stage, and he was giving us cards. So it was, for me, it was huge. I mean, he was, at that point, that was really all the music I knew. I didn't know a lot of music. I wasn't somebody that listened to the radio that much. So, you know, to this day, I just, you know, I'm amazed that I had a chance to see him. You know, it was incredible.
That's good. That's the stuff we love to hear. I mean, you know, I was never fortunate enough to see him, but I love hearing from the people who did, and it just that's really why we started doing this part of our show. We kind of expanded it because we wanted to capture this and have it, you know, digitally stored forever, so that people can go back and look at these stories. Because, you know, if you're an Elvis fan, if I didn't get to see him, I want to hear from somebody that did. So talking to folks like you is just, it really means a lot to us. And so, um, the one thing, and I wanted to ask you, did it ever occur to you that you had seen Elvis just prior to Aloha from Hawaii? I mean, we're talking a couple months later, he's stepping on stage in front of 1.5 billion people. Did that, I mean, you had just seen him. So did that ever occur to you at any point in time after, after you saw him, that you thought about it, later, years later? Did you look back and say, wow, I saw him just before that big show?
No, I didn't make that connection. But I remember Aloha because he went on in the United States. They were going to broadcast it live. I mean, they didn't show it till months later, I believe, but the actual transmission you could hear on the radio at midnight on some station. And I was determined to hear that concert. And I remember I made my dad, open the car door and turn it on so I could sit in the car by myself at midnight while they were all asleep. And I was listening to the radio, and I heard the show. I heard the drums. I heard the vamp, and I think I heard. I couldn't stay awake for all of it. I think at some point I crashed, but I heard the majority of the opening. The first few songs of Aloha from Hawaii and I think about it now, how incredible that is that I actually heard it the night it went out. I mean, it didn't really dawn on me till this moment that, how incredible was that I don't even remember how the heck I found that out, being a little kid, 9 years old, and making my dad turn on the car, and sitting in there at nighttime in the dark, listening to it by myself. So, yeah.
Did the car start the next day?
Good question. I don't remember, but get this. What I do remember is that it wasn't even in a garage; it was out in the street. So you probably wouldn't let a little kid run down the street in the middle of the night, sit in a car by himself nowadays. But back then, you could kind of.
Well, you were 10.
So yeah, that was really
cool.
Let
me ask you something while we're on the subject here, just out of curiosity. What would be one thing, you got to see Elvis, you got to see his showmanship, you got to see what type of person he was. What would be one thing that you would want to pass on to somebody like that really did know a lot about Elvis? What's one thing, looking back on your experience with him, that you would want to say, hey, just know this about him? What would that be?
I think the one thing would be that he loved people, and he loved this audience, and he never forgot about that. And aside from the immense amount of talent that he had, I mean, obviously you've heard that there's musicians that said his timing was like the best in the world. He was always right on his timing. And
right.
But I've met a couple of people. I met one guy from a popular band that kind of came up. I think they were in the 60s. Little Anthony and the Imperials. And
yeah. Mm-hmm.
And I met him, and I was talking with him, and so he was in Vegas. They would do shows in Vegas too when Elvis was out there, and he met Elvis, and he said, he said for the big superstar that he says he was probably the most down to earth, nicest guy he'd ever met in his life. He said just a super nice guy, and really generous, and just always and complimentary of other people and of other groups. So he just said, yeah, he said that was one of his highlights of meeting him. And he said it was just, he said just a really, nice guy for,
right.
For being, who he was, you know what I mean? Like that's, so it's, and you hear that story over and over, and you just realize he really was a genuine person. He was just a nice, person. He didn't have he treated everybody the same, I guess, is probably the best way to think about it, and I truly think he loved his fans. He loved people, and you could hear it in his songs, you know, in his heart.
Right. And
So
I think
if you
the way
haven't seen Elvis or seen any of the, I was just gonna say, if you know, for people who haven't seen him, um, it's hard to just to convey, like, you know, just the feeling that he gave you. But
right.
you know, you can, I mean, you can see it in the you know, in the documentaries that are out there. So if you're new to Elvis and you haven't seen him, you know, you got to check out some of the concert documentaries, because they're pretty amazing.
I've heard some of the people that have seen, well, just about all the people that I've ever talked to that saw him live in concert, they said that it was almost like the emotion that you felt and the electricity that you felt was almost to the point of like overwhelming. Did Can you comment on that a little bit?
Yeah, I mean, it was that electricity was, I mean, it was, for lack of a better word, it was palpable. You could feel it. I mean, you could feel it in the air when he went on stage. It's just, it was. I've been to a lot of concerts. I've never felt that before. Like the way you felt it at an Elvis concert, with the just the music, the musicians, and you know, it's really weird, but it's a good analogy of the electricity. There was a certain electricity, and you just felt it. And I don't know really how to capture it, but other than, you know, all these years later, it still affects me when I talk about it, you know. So
That's amazing.
yeah, it's no, it's he was amazing. I mean, I'm lucky that I got to see him, you know, twice. Really lucky. I'm lucky, I guess, that my dad was a fan.
Another question I have, I've always wondered, for people like yourself, do you ever find yourself, maybe if you're sitting in a quiet room or something, do you ever play that tape in your head? You know, because you have a, you know, your memory is like a, you know, it's like a DVD that's always running. Do you ever play that concert in your, because you've captured it in your brain? So do you ever play it, you know, just play it back and just go back to that day and remember it?
Yeah, I do. I've and I've tried to remember the one I remember, I guess, that had a bigger impact. Well, they both had an impact, but I remember more of of Elvis, just like the interaction with the audience from Lake Tahoe, because of the fact that the stage pretty much was where the dinner tables are, right? So he was like right there on top of the people, and that's why I think he had such a fun night, because he was interacting and telling jokes with the audience. And I just remember that, you know, I've replayed that a lot because I remember that part. You know, the just how it was really cool that he was joking with the audience and interacting a lot with the audience, you know, and talking between the songs. And so that's those are the most, I guess, clear memories of when I saw him, is the Lake Tahoe night, because we were so much closer.
Right, right.
Yeah.
Michael, do you have anything?
Yeah, so one thing that I've always thought of is, if you were to compare, you know, him in Las Vegas, for That's the Way It Is, to Elvis on tour, when he was in Las Vegas, he seemed more tame, more or less, for, you know, he was being filmed in Las Vegas, and it just seemed different than when he was in different cities. So what were some of the differences and similarities from the Tahoe to Oakland?
I think the biggest difference would be, um, I do remember in Oakland, he pretty much went through his songs. He did a little bit of talking, but not much. It was pretty much a concert, you know, straight through. And I think that's because when the Oakland Coliseum is a lot bigger, and you know, the stage is really high compared to where the people are at, you know, on down in it, you know, the access is different. So I think you're right about that. I think there's a difference. I think if you remember from That's the Way It Is, you seem to be a little more playful maybe at times, and there was that point where he even walks out into the audience, you know, in that one.
Right.
And so that's kind of like Lake Tahoe. It was sort of like that, where it was a little bit, you know, he had a little bit more of that. I think he felt the energy from the audience as well, you know, coming back to him. And I think just that, and then compared to Oakland, where that was just so massive and so intense, because it was just like, you know, light bulbs flashing all the time, just like, you know, back then everybody had the little cameras and it was just like light bulbs everywhere.
Right.
So it seemed to me like in Oakland, it was like, it kind of was like watching that Elvis on tour, because he was just going through the songs, you know, going through them, and then he interacted a little bit. And it's so funny because you know, I do remember the "thank you very much," you know, "you're a beautiful audience." It's funny because
Right.
you know, you've seen that or you've heard it, but he really did say that, you know, and he said it pretty much all, you know,
Right.
in all his concerts. So I remember that. So I think, you know, I think that's the difference. I think if you take the Tahoe performance, it's a little bit closer to what you saw in the, you know, Elvis, That's the Way It Is documentary. So I hope I answered your question. I'm not sure.
Yeah. That was
Yeah. One other question that I have, and I forgot to ask Gary, and I forgot to ask Ed this, and I'm kind of bothered that I did, but I want to ask you, because you were so young when you saw him in concert, fast forward 4 years after you see him the second time, so now you're 14, and I want to ask you, where were you when Elvis died? And I want to ask you, since you actually had seen him not too far back, what kind of impact did that have on you?
You know, I've thought about this actually more often than not. I was with a group of friends at the local plaza. I think we were getting ice cream or something, and one of our friends called up his mom I think she called up the mom to see if she could come down and pick us up. And she gets off the phone and she just turns to me. She goes, "Oh, by the way, Jeff, my mom wanted me to tell you that Elvis died." And that's how I found out. And I was like, "What?" And I was just I didn't say anything. I was just stunned. You know, it was just unbelievable. You know, you couldn't. It was. I mean, the way I found out too was just kind of. I still think about that. How, I don't know. It kind of sucked for me with the way she just sort of nonchalantly threw that off. You know, she wasn't really an Elvis fan, so she was just the way she said that. So I remember exactly what she said. And at the time, I think I didn't cry or nothing. I was just too stunned. I'm not sure if I cried that night or anything. I was just stunned. Yeah.
So anyway, Jeff, we want to thank you once again for coming to see us at Elvis Back on Tour. It was a true honor, and we always consider it a privilege whenever we get a chance to speak with somebody that saw Elvis in concert. And you're always a friend here. So if you come up with a new memory, feel free to shoot us a line, and we'll get you back on here, and we'll get that as part of the interview. But again, we thank you so much for taking your time out to join us, and we really appreciate it.
Oh, thanks for having me on. Thank you for taking me down memory lane. It's been really good, very touching, and I mean, I think it's fantastic what you do, and yeah, if I can, you know, if I'm somehow able to finagle something for you guys down the road at one of those locations, I'll do my best. But thank you so much. I really enjoy what you guys are doing, and keep it up. And thanks again. Appreciate it.
Thank you, Jeff. That means a lot coming from you, and we hope to see you soon.
Thanks so much. Take care.